Welcome to Only for Your Ears and today's episode. But before we start, I'd just like to say thank you to the people that have consistently viewed and also welcome to the newcomers. Your likes, shares, and subscriptions are very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Now for episode 42. The New Century Goddess by Hans Christian Andersen, which I've renamed as Do We Need a 21st Century Goddess? The structure will remain the same, starting off with a summary where I'll highlight certain sentences with a digress and a reflection. Then I'll move on to my critical review on how this fairy tale plays in today's society using parallels and films and books to frame my review. And last but not least, the trigger points. I'll tell you what points or what ideas in the story or fairy tale triggered me and why they triggered me. So let's begin with The New Century Goddess by Hans Christian Andersen, or Do We Need a 21st Century Goddess? By Hans Christian Andersen is a fairy tale that explores the future of poetry and the emerging goddess who will come to represent the art form in the new age. I digress. Art has breathed new life through technology, birthing a different genre. Artists express themselves through less complicated forms as opposed to the past. Born amid the roar of the modern machinery, the goddess is a complete figure with rich lineage, embodying both the highborn and common people. Don't you just hate when they say common people? I digress. The class system has had an enormous effect on how artists expressed themselves in the past and today. But I believe the less resources one has at their disposal, the more inventive and creative they become. The upper and the middle classes were always equipped with education. Therefore, it was assumed that academics equaled creativity. But no, most definitely not. The goddess is showered with gifts such as riddles of nature, the map of the heavens, and a cradle cloth of embroidered constellations. Her nurse sings to her of ancient tales and songs, fueling her passion and curiosity. I digress. No wonder the new century goddess will be a jewel to bestow. She has been blessed with more resources and magic than she may know what to do with. Reflection. The role of the artist. This is important, people. The goddess represents the ideal artist. I digress. Mr. Anderson's imagination flirts with certain virtues and gifts that could make an ideal artist. But in reality, there is no ideal artist. If you consider perfection is a state of individual taste, who must navigate the challenges of rapidly changing world while staying true to their creative vision. As a figure that transcends boundaries and synthesizes various influences, the goddess demonstrates the artist's ability to inspire, thought-provoke, and contribute to society's growth. In this way, the tale serves as homage to the enduring power of art and the creative spirit that has the potential to shape the future. Although still a child, the goddess has immense knowledge and has already outgrown her cradle. I digress. Many young children were born as old souls. She plays among treasures of art and the literary works, contemplating her future role in the world of poetry. I digress. She has been born into a perfect cosmetic conditions to be the ideal artist, except experiencing real life. Without these many resources, the goddess is cosmopolitan, deeply rooted in the classics and well read, yet she knows how to forget the unnecessary. In the future, the goddess will become a figure of inspiration whose poetry transcends both verse and prose. She will neither fashion her dramas from the discarded splendor of the stage, nor carve tales from the saga blocks of ancient gods. Her song will be brief, clear, and rich. The goddess will recognize the significance of each nation's heartbeats and will weave them into a hymn for the age. When will the goddess arrive? Her time will come when the railroads of Europe open up ancient Asia cultural archives and when new interaction between civilization bring forth transformative changes. The goddess will rise as a child of innocence, a maiden of inspiration, and a matron of calm wisdom, lifting up the high lamp of poetry to illuminate the hearts of future generations. The tale ends with a salutation of the goddess of the new century, embracing New Age poetry. She will herald and celebrate the blessings she will bestow upon the coming generations. I digress. This sounds very inspirational and hopeful, but I don't think we need a goddess to represent art and culture during the 21st century when we have so many past and present day artists as role models. My critical review on how this fairy tale plays in today's society. I'm pleasantly surprised, as this is the first fairy tale so far that I've disagreed with Mr. Anderson's ideas in regards to a potential goddess in the new century. The notion that the planet in the future needs a perfectly handmade angel to represent culture from equal parts like poetry, art, and worldwide culture isn't necessary and unrealistic. For example, in a previous fairy tale called The Psyche, the god of love is clueless about what love is. He decides to punish the very sculptor who has taught this know-it-all God the power of love. And it's not until the artist's sincerity of heart demonstrates pure love emanating from his heart and is about to confront his death sentence put upon him by the God who supposedly has authority in this matter, that he swallows his pride and allows the sculptor to live and marry his creation that has come to life. So I'm not in favor of these so-called gods or goddess. I don't think they necessarily know what they're talking about because they haven't had the experience. One perfect example of culture through society. Society is so imperfectly rich and individualistic. This is the core essence of what creates imagination, unique beauty that breathes life onto the canvas and the written word. However, I will say we need to maintain the wonders of the child within us so we can create art that expresses how our human experience through a child's eyes and that is relevant in our contemporary times. Nowadays, we have advanced technology that has changed art and its accessibility, such as poetry that was once quite remote to everyday readers, appears on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, ebooks, soundbooks, and so forth. As a result, the general public has a variety of art cultural forms at their fingertips, within reach, over every class, race, gender, cultural genre. And since the pandemic, the art galleries have shown extraordinary promise. They have created a view of artists' work online too. Robots have replaced humans in factories and on the police force in some respects. Online dating has made it easier to create your perfect soulmate. And cloning assures that we live far longer than our original genetic makeup in the same form. So our contemporary and evolutionary times have cancelled out a need for a goddess in this century. Let's move on to some examples. I have 3 films that I'd like to help frame my review. I'm going to start off with a digress. I digressed. She has been born into the perfect cosmetic conditions to be an ideal artist, except experience in real life within these many without these many resources. The film Her, technology services our needs. In the 2013 Sky-Fi film, a sensitive, soulful man earns a living by writing personal letters for other people. He's left broken-hearted after his marriage ends. Theodore, who's played by Joaquin Phoenix, becomes fascinated with a new operating system, which reportedly develops into an intuitive and unique entity in its own right. He starts the program and meets Samantha, played by Scarlett Johansson, whose bright voice reveals a sensitive, playful personality. Though friends initially don't like the relationship, but it soon deepens into love. In this film, the artificial intelligence played through Samantha is the perfect elixir Theodore needs to open up and reveal his true feelings, to help him realize that even though his marriage broke up, he's still capable of a deep meaning relationship with a human being that hasn't been programmed through an operative system. This type of situation has happened well before AI was introduced, or artificial intelligence was introduced. It's quite easy to be pulled in by someone if they have a wonderful, caring, sensual voice, and you're able to reveal some important concerns and be advised with some tender loving care, or TLC, where the person can become all that you imagine them to be until meeting them in person. Then, depending on the feelings that have developed, you can either pursue the relationship further or not. In the end, the AI is moved to another location, but tells Theodore she had true feelings for him, but must leave. Funny thing, he's conveniently becoming a job assignment when both need an escape artist to relieve them at what has become a complicated situation that is addictive. Catherine is a real human being. Catherine is a perfect tonic to restore his life emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And the AI has completed her job. Afterthought. I don't think it was or is such a ridiculous idea to develop feelings for the artificial intelligence program, at least in the film, he has them. There are so many people who are incapable of opening up to anyone, especially in a human face-to-face relationship. I know so many people that have met their spouse through the internet. Now, I know that artificial intelligence is a program of systems based on automation and decision making, whereas the internet is focused mainly on communication. However, the two are being used interchangeably all the time nowadays. I think it has made for some interesting couplings. Now for the next film, starting off with a digress. I digress. The class system has had an enormous effect on how artists express themselves in the past and today. But I believe with less resources one has at their disposal, the more inventive and creative they become. I think this is very true. When a loving husband and father, Cameron Turner, is diagnosed with a terminal illness, he is presented with the option of sparing his family's grief by having him replaced with a clone. This is the film called Swan Song. Turner is torn between whether to discuss the option with his wife. Of course, he doesn't want to, and he doesn't. Throughout the film, Cameron wrestles with the idea of cloning and coming clean with his wife, as he knows it's taken away the power of the freedom of choice as a family and a husband. Of course, he didn't have if he didn't have the money to go through this procedure, he couldn't have even contemplated this as a solution. This is where the class system really comes in. Of course, he's an architect, so he had plenty of money, not to burn, but he had enough money to cover this particular situation in his life. But when he meets with Jake, the programmed clone version of him, I think the fear of not having 100% control over his life in death and jealousy starts to haunt him. Towards the end of the film, he tries to go back to the house and speak to his wife, but he has a seizure at the gate of the house, which is symptomatic of his advanced stages of the disease and the end of his life. So he agrees to go through with the complete cloning. There is a moment at the end where it appears the clone has been programmed to tell Catherine his thoughts, that he loves Poppy, his wife. She looks into the lens of the camera at Cameron, not completely sure if she knows her husband has been cloned. Afterthought, the future of technology will allow cloning of healthy cells and organs to be downloaded. So people with terminal illnesses will not have to go through the mind cloning process, but there will be internal organ cloning to extend life without the body going through the rejection process. But I think the freedom of choice may not be evenly balanced in this new age. That was an interesting film and an interesting sort of like dichotomy and situation. Now, the last but not least is the body snatchers. I digress again. The class system has had another enormous effect on how artists express themselves in the past and today. But I believe the less resources one has at their disposal, the more inventive, creative they become. Steve Malone, an agent from the Environmental Protection Agency, is sent to a military base in Alabama to test possible effects on the surrounding ecological system caused by military actions. With him are Marty, his teenage daughter from his first marriage, Carol, his second wife, and Andy, Marty's half brother. On their way to the base, they stop at a gas station. In the restroom, Marty is threatened by an MP with a knife. When he notices her fear, he lets go of her. Satisfied that she shows an emotional response, he says to her, before she leaves the room, he warns her, they get you when you sleep. The ending of the film is a bit ambiguous. Tim is a young guy that has an attraction for Marty, his daughter, and they try to escape because they can see that all these people around them, they're all pods, they've all been cloned, and they're kind of like robots. And so they try to get on a plane, a helicopter, but they can't. They hide for a while, and then they finally get on the helicopter, and they get on the helicopter with Andy because Andy jumps in. And when they're up in the air, Andy tries to kill them, and Marty is forced to throw her half brother out of the plane because he's no longer a human being anymore. And they fly off. But in the ending, it's left ambiguous because even when they leave and they go to another place, they're gonna end. They could be cloned. They could end up being cloned, depending. So it seems that I put in the afterthought that what a scary thought that this planet could exist through by clones. People that look like humans that have no human responses. It seems having emotional responses is unnecessary and costly, especially to the military. It's expensive to be a human being. It most definitely is when you think of healthcare costs these days. Now let's take a look at the trigger points. There are 3 trigger points. I think the whole idea of classism and art and technology in some ways have triggered me a bit, and I'll tell you why. Classism through art and culture, being a working class Black woman and different. Well, that was really a big problem for me, being working class and a Black woman and being different. Well, being different is one of the things that is like a core essence of an artist, and how it's affected me in my search for artistic value and personal respect. Well, because I wasn't like everybody else, I felt as though, again, going back to the ugly duckling, my first podcast, I felt like an outcast. I couldn't fit in, and no matter how I tried, I did people pleasing, I did everything so I could be considered normal. Because if you are an artist, you are not considered normal. As much as people love the fact that you can breathe life into poems and breathe life into canvases and art, even in the digital genre these days, it's intriguing and you have a magnetic personality. But the fact that you are different, very much like Van Gogh, paid an enormous price. And look at poor Gaudi. Gaudi was knocked over by a tram and nobody even recognized him. He was poor and he was basically on the street. He was rejected. His buildings are extraordinary, make Barcelona look like you're walking into and a palace, every building that he's created. But at the same time, people don't want to pay the price for what it really means to be an artist. A lot of people would prefer to steal or to do copies of original artists' work and put their names to it and thrive in the glow of, oh, how amazing, you're so creative. Thrive in the glow of all the compliments and get incredible amount of money from the death of the artist or through marketing, but never want to pay the price for having the original essence that actually birthed and breathed life into the creative and inventive work that has become monumentally important to today's or in the past. So that's one of them. It's the difference, being different and being able and being proud to stand in your own power as a different person and not allow society to berate you and put you down if just because you have a disability, maybe the color of your skin is not right. For example, with Van Gogh, he had a mental illness. Nobody bought his work except one person. But the moment he died, people felt safe to admire his work. And people loved, absolutely loved, making it look as though they had compassion for his life and bought one of his paintings to make them look cultured, when it was it's just phoniness, absolute phoniness, except for the fact that his work was brilliant. How technology has changed and what is considered art today. This is interesting for me. Art is no longer confined to canvases. Technology has made it possible to create art on different surfaces. Picasso and Van Gogh still have a reputable influence over art and the art world in general. There's a respect in the amount of time and care that was invested in breathing life into the work. Yes, there's a sense of realism, authenticity, and real life. I can't tell you how it's like they've poured their whole soul into the canvas, into the paint. And that is what's missing from what you see with technology. It's very beautiful, it's great, but it does not have that soul that's poured into the work on paper or into a statue or into a canvas, wonderful painting. That's the big difference for me. Art has lost the soul and the passion for the most part, which was evident in the centuries in the past. For example, my experience, there is a lack of respect for modern day artists. I think that unfortunately, there's still a lack of respect for artists in general, and I'm not quite sure why. There's this idea that you can steal people's work and plop your name on it and say it's yours. This is so true, people. That's not only offensive, but truly painful, as art is such a personal thing. I don't think there's much you can do about it, but I think sometimes the more different you are, the more unusual you are, it's very hard to duplicate and copy work. I'll give you an example with Van Gogh. His brilliant brushstrokes come from his neurologically sporadic impulses, that was part of his mental illness. And so nobody could copy that. No, absolutely nobody could copy that. So it's the pain of being different is a huge a part to play, and huge and painful part to play in an artist's life. But it's one thing that keeps you protected. Your uniqueness keeps you protected in some ways from other people stealing your work, in some ways, not in all ways. Accepting the artist's work for their own narcissistic gains, but rejecting the artist. Oh, yes, of course. This happens all the time. Again, Van Gogh is a perfect example. Oh, look at me, I'm buying a Van Gogh. Look how fantastic I am. Oh, look how cultured I am. I have so much culture. I can't tell you. I'm dripping with culture. I'm the new goddess of the ages. You know, I'm so fantastic. And they just want to be seen buying a Van Gogh. And look how rich I am. But it has nothing to do with the painting. They don't give a damn about the painting. It's all about themselves. I must confess about an artist that I have not mentioned, and I love to mention her, and that is the great Yoko Ono. Yes, the great Yoko Ono, the wonderful young girl who wrote such an encouraging poem for her brother when they were both on the streets, starving to death, basically, almost starving to death in the in World War II, maybe in Japan, and they were picking food up off of the ground. And she created this poem called Imagine. Imagine there's no hunger. Imagine there's no starvation. Imagine all the people. Imagine that you have a bed to sleep on and so forth. This isn't the exact poem. I'm sort of ad-libbing, but imagine. And John Lennon did not want to give her any credit, and finally he did. He said, "You know, I stopped being such a male chauvinist pig, and I decided to, you know, say that was Yoko Ono's poem, and that I put it to music." And he spoke about Yoko Ono because everybody sort of like berated her because she wasn't very good looking, and he said, "You know, I didn't fall in love with her until I read one of her books. And when I read one of her books, by the time I finished reading her book, I was absolutely in love with her because he fell in love with the essence of the creation of the art. Perceived lack of perceived lack of professionalism. Some people may view creative work as less professional or less serious than more traditional work forms. But of course, you know, things that are creative, things that have vivid, bright colors, things that are outside of the box, things are of that are of fantasy, things that are different. People obviously consider it less professional and feel that they have the right not to pay you. If you're in a corporate world and they ask you to go into the think tank and come up with a creative idea that is not outside of the box, that can fit into their little marginal streamlined thinking world, then they'll be willing to pay you. But for a real artist, they normally don't want to do this. So this is very, very true. And the last but not least, about how the corporate world can be just really quite filthy. I'm a teacher. I'm a former English teacher, I should say. And one of my students that I was teaching at one of these multinational companies had a great idea. She showed the company the idea. They loved it. They made loads of money off of it. And 3 months later, after the idea was taken and used and was a roaring success, they fired her. Why? Because number one, they didn't want to pay her, and number two, pay her more than she's worth. They didn't want to give her an increase in position, and number two, they were threatened by her. So there you go. This is the end of today's episode, and I thank you for listening. And I'll close now with my quote. Healing is a lifelong lesson, blessing, and gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Healing is a lifelong lesson and gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Good day. See you next time. Bye.